The courtroom was dead silent, every eye fixed on Ava Caldwell. She sat at the defendant's table, her expression unreadable, almost unsettling. Unlike most in her position, she wasn't fidgeting or slouched over. She was calm, poised, and waiting. Across the room, Sergeant Daniel Harper stood confidently, hands behind his back, dressed in full uniform. His voice echoed through the room as he addressed the judge. "Your Honor, on the night of June 14th, the defendant resisted a lawful arrest. She became aggressive, striking me across the chest. I attempted to restrain her, but she continued to fight. Given the situation, I had no choice but to use force to protect myself and the public." A hushed murmur rippled through the courtroom. People shifted in their seats, some whispering to each other, others simply watching Ava, waiting for a reaction. But she gave them nothing. Her hands were folded neatly on the table, her eyes locked on Harper, studying him, dissecting every word, every movement. If she was angry, she didn't show it. If she was afraid, there was no sign of it. The judge, an older man with thinning gray hair, cleared his throat. "Miss Caldwell, do you have anything to say regarding these allegations?" Ava finally moved. She lifted her chin slightly and spoke, her voice steady and controlled. "I do." She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Everything that man just said is a lie." The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs. A few people even turned to each other in shock. The judge banged his gavel, calling for silence. Harper scoffed. "A lie?" He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I have been a police officer for 17 years. I have an impeccable record. I risk my life every day to protect this city, and now I'm being accused of lying?" Ava didn't blink. "Yes." The judge sighed. "Miss Caldwell, you understand the severity of these charges, correct? You're facing obstruction of justice, assaulting an officer, and resisting arrest. Lying in court will not help your case." Ava didn't flinch. "I understand that perfectly." Harper shook his head, exhaling loudly. "Then I suggest you choose your words carefully, because I have body cam footage, witness statements, and physical evidence that back up everything I've said." That was when Ava finally smiled. It was small, barely there, but just enough for Harper to see it. Just enough to make him shift his weight slightly, adjusting his stance. Because what he didn't realize yet, what no one in that courtroom knew, was that Ava Caldwell was not an ordinary defendant. She was a former Navy SEAL, and she was already 10 steps ahead of him. But Harper still thought he was in control. He squared his shoulders, scanning the room like a man who knew he had the upper hand. His uniform was crisp, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He had played this game before, a veteran officer, a trusted public servant. His word carried weight. The jury watched him waiting. The judge motioned for him to continue. Harper took a deep breath, then turned his gaze back to Ava. "Let's go over the facts again." He reached for a stack of papers on the prosecutor's table, flipping through them like he was reading straight from the gospel. "On the night in question, I responded to a disturbance call at 9:37 p.m. The suspect, Miss Caldwell, matched the description of a reported trespasser in the area. Upon making contact, I informed her that she was being detained. She refused to comply, became violent, and struck me in the chest with a closed fist." He looked up, making sure his words sank in. "At this point, I attempted to restrain her, but she fought back aggressively. She reached for my service weapon." Ava's voice sliced through the room. "I reached for your gun? Is that what you're saying?" Harper blinked. For the first time, there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Ava tilted her head, her fingers tapping against the table. "I reached for your gun, is that what you're saying?" Harper regained his composure quickly. "Yes." Ava exhaled, shaking her head with a slight chuckle. "That's interesting." The judge shot her a warning look. "Miss Caldwell, you'll have your turn to speak. Let the officer finish." Ava nodded. "Of course." Harper adjusted his stance, clearing his throat. "After a brief struggle, I managed to restrain her using standard procedure. She was placed in handcuffs and transported to the station." Silence hung in the air for a moment. Then the prosecutor, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s, stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A body cam footage from the arrest. A small TV screen flickered on beside the judge's bench. Harper folded his arms, confident. He had reviewed this footage before. It was grainy, dark, and filled with just enough commotion to justify his claims. He had done this before, knew how to position himself, how to control the angle of the footage, how to make things work in his favor. The video started playing. Ava's figure appeared on the screen, standing beneath a dim streetlight. Her hands were at her sides, her voice clear. "What's the problem, officer?" "We got a call about a suspicious person in the area. You match the description." "Suspicious how?" "I need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back." The camera shifted as Harper moved in closer. The footage jumped, skipping a few seconds. Then the next visible frame showed Ava on the ground, Harper pinning her down. The courtroom was silent. Ava leaned forward slightly. "Play that part again." The judge motioned to the bailiff, who rewound the footage. The screen flickered, back to that crucial moment, the missing seconds, the jump in the timeline. Ava turned to Harper, her expression unreadable. "Where's the part where I hit you?" Harper's jaw tightened. "It's there. It happens right before the footage cuts out." Ava finished for him. "Right before the footage cuts out." A few people in the jury exchanged glances. The prosecutor cleared her throat. "Your Honor, the body cam footage appears to be incomplete. There seems to be a missing portion." Harper interrupted. "That's normal. Sometimes body cams glitch during sudden movement. The footage is still clear enough to show her resistance." Ava laughed under her breath. "Glitch, that's a good one." Harper stiffened. The judge tapped his gavel. "Miss Caldwell, you'll have your turn to respond. But Officer Harper, this missing footage is concerning. Do you have an unedited version available?" Harper hesitated just a second too long, and Ava noticed. But she wasn't done yet. Harper shifted slightly, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. That hesitation, that brief second of doubt, was all Ava needed. She wasn't just watching him. She was studying him. He wasn't nervous, not yet. But he would be. The prosecutor leaned forward. "Sergeant Harper, you're saying the footage is incomplete due to a glitch?" Harper gave a curt nod. "Yes, it happens sometimes." The judge exhaled, rubbing his temple. "And do you have the full version on file? The complete recording?" Harper didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward the prosecutor, a quick, subtle movement, almost like he was checking to see how much trouble he might be in. Ava caught it, the jury caught it, the entire room caught it. Finally, he straightened his shoulders. "I'd have to check with my department. But I assure you, the footage clearly shows the defendant resisting." Ava turned to her lawyer, a younger man named Bryce Holloway. He had been quiet up until now, letting things play out. But now, he looked at her, leaning in slightly. "You want me to press him?" he whispered. Ava barely moved her lips. "No, not yet." Because she had something better. The prosecutor sat down, but there was an uneasiness in her expression. Even she knew something wasn't right. The judge cleared his throat. "Miss Caldwell, it's your turn. You may respond." Ava stood up. She moved slowly, not sluggish, just deliberate, like she had all the time in the world. Her voice was steady, sure, controlled. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit my own evidence." The prosecutor blinked. "Your own evidence?" Ava reached into a folder on the table, pulled out a USB drive, and held it up. "This contains surveillance footage from a nearby business, a security camera that caught the entire thing." Harper visibly tensed. Ava noticed. So did everyone else. The prosecutor looked surprised. "You have outside footage?" Ava's lips curled slightly. "Oh, I do." She walked to the bailiff and handed him the drive. A few moments later, the TV screen flickered again. The video started playing. This time the angle was different, clearer. It showed Harper approaching Ava under the streetlight. The conversation started the same way, but when it reached the part where Harper claimed she struck him, the footage told a different story. Ava never raised a hand. never even moved aggressively. Instead, Harper was the one who shoved her first, hard. Ava's body jerked backward from the impact. Then Harper grabbed her, twisting her arm behind her back before slamming her into the pavement. The courtroom erupted. Gasps. Outrage. Someone in the back actually cursed out loud. The judges. Gavel slammed down. Order! Order in this court! Ava turned slowly. Harper's face had gone pale. His jaw clenched, his fists curling at his sides. For the first time since this trial began, he looked trapped. Ava finally spoke. Where in that video do I reach for your gun, Sergeant? Harper opened his mouth. No words came out. Ava took a slow step forward. Where in that video do I attack you? Silence. The judge turned to Harper. Officer, do you have an explanation for this? Harper's throat bobbed. His mind was racing for a way out, but there wasn't one. Ava tilted her head slightly. You lied under oath, didn't you? She didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. The weight of the truth was crushing him without her having to do a thing. The prosecutor stood, her voice sharper now. Your Honor, I request a recess to reevaluate this case. But Ava wasn't done yet, because she still had one last card to play. The tension in the room was so thick you could almost feel it pressing down. Harper's face was tight, his breathing shallow. He knew, everyone knew, that he was cornered. But Ava? She was just getting started. She turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I have one more piece of evidence to submit. Harper visibly flinched. The judge sighed, rubbing his temple. Proceed. Ava walked back to her table, picked up another document, and handed it to the bailiff. The prosecutor leaned forward, curious. What is this? Ava folded her arms. Medical records. Harper stiffened. The judge skimmed the papers, his frown deepening. These reports state that Miss Caldwell suffered a dislocated shoulder, several bruised ribs, and a mild concussion. He set the papers down, his eyes sharp. Yet, according to Officer Harper, she was the aggressor. A few jury members shook their heads, clearly seeing through the lie now. Ava turned to Harper, her voice calm. Do you remember when they checked me at the station? Harper's lips pressed into a thin line. He wasn't answering. Ava didn't need him to. She stepped forward slightly. How does someone get a dislocated shoulder from resisting arrest? How does someone end up with bruised ribs when all they did was, what did you say? Strike you in the chest. Harper finally spoke, his voice lower. I had to restrain you. You were a threat. Ava's eyebrow lifted. A threat? She turned to the jury, letting that word hang in the air for a moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, she reached up and rolled back her blazer sleeve. The room fell into stunned silence. Because on Ava's forearm, clear as day, was the Navy SEAL trident tattoo. The prosecutor actually gasped. Ava turned back to Harper, her eyes locked on him. You're a trained officer, right? You've had combat training. Harper swallowed. Of course. Ava nodded. Interesting, because so have I. She stepped forward again, just enough for him to feel the weight of what she was saying. I served overseas. I've neutralized threats in ways you couldn't even begin to imagine. And yet, she motioned toward the screen, where the footage had frozen, showing Harper slamming her to the ground. You want everyone here to believe that I, a woman with my training, attacked you and somehow ended up like that. Harper said nothing. He didn't have to. His silence was loud enough. The judge exhaled sharply. Officer Harper, I need you to answer the question. Harper's hands curled into fists. She resisted. Ava tilted her head. That's not an answer. The judge leaned forward. Officer Harper, did you fabricate your report? Harper's face was stone. Ava's voice came softer now, but with an edge. You lied, didn't you? The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, at this time I'd like to request that Officer Harper's testimony be stricken from the record due to its clear inconsistencies. Furthermore, I request an immediate review of his past cases to ensure this is not a pattern of behavior. Harper turned to her sharply. Are you serious? The prosecutor didn't blink. Dead serious. Ava folded her arms, watching the panic start to settle in his eyes. Because Harper had walked into this courtroom thinking he had power. But his power had just slipped through his fingers. The judge sighed, rubbing his forehead. We'll take a brief recess while I review this matter. But Ava already knew this trial was over. The judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom. Recess for 15 minutes. The jury members shuffled out, whispering among themselves. The spectators, now buzzing with murmurs, stole glances at Harper. His once unshakable confidence had vanished. But Ava? She was still calm, still watching. Harper turned to his lawyer, speaking in hushed, hurried tones. The man's face was tense, his lips pressed into a thin line. He wasn't defending Harper anymore. He was calculating an exit strategy. Ava walked back to her seat, taking a slow sip of water. Bryce, her lawyer, leaned in. They're scrambling. She nodded. They should be. Bryce glanced toward Harper, who had started rubbing his temples, looking less like a seasoned officer and more like a man coming to grips with the fact that he just ruined his own career. Think he'll try to strike a deal? Bryce asked. Ava smirked. Doesn't matter. It's too late for him. And she was right. 15 minutes later, the judge returned. His expression was unreadable. He adjusted his glasses, glancing down at the paperwork in front of him. After reviewing the presented evidence, I have serious concerns regarding Officer Harper's testimony and conduct. His gaze flicked toward the prosecutor. Does the state wish to continue pursuing charges against Miss Caldwell? The prosecutor stood, straightening her blazer. No, Your Honor. Given the overwhelming evidence contradicting Officer Harper's claims, we move to dismiss all charges immediately. A heavy pause filled the room. Then, motion granted. Miss Caldwell, you are free to go. There it was. The gavel slammed down, and just like that, it was over. Ava exhaled slowly, standing. But she didn't move just yet. Instead, she turned just enough to meet Harper's eyes. His fists were clenched at his sides, his face flushed red. For the first time in this entire process, he was the one being judged. But Ava didn't need to gloat, didn't need to say anything at all. She just held his gaze, let him feel it. Because what he had done wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about one lie. How many others had he done this to? How many people didn't have the resources, that training, the ability to fight back, the way she did? Ava wasn't the first, but she would make sure she was the last. Harper's lawyer whispered something in his ear, but he barely reacted. His mind was somewhere else now, maybe thinking about what happened next for him. Because this wasn't just a loss. It was the beginning of his downfall. Ava picked up her things with slow, measured movements. She had won. But this wasn't just about victory. It was about exposure. She glanced toward the back of the courtroom where a few reporters had already started scribbling in their notepads. This wasn't going to disappear. Not this time. As she turned toward the exit, Harper's voice cut through the air, low, bitter. You think you're special, Ava? You think this changes anything? He muttered, you just got lucky. Slowly, she faced him. The room had mostly emptied out. Only a few lingering jurors and court staff left. She stepped closer, not in anger, not in intimidation, just close enough that he had to listen. Luck? She repeated, her voice calm. Harper held his ground, but his eyes flickered with something he wasn't ready to name. Ava tilted her head. Tell me, Harper, was it luck that I had surveillance footage? Was it luck that your body cam just happened to cut out at the exact moment you needed it to? Was it luck that your own lies unraveled in front of everyone? She let the silence stretch between them. Then finally she leaned in just a little, lowering her voice. You did this to yourself. Harper's jaw tightened. Ava held his gaze for another second, then turned and walked away. Bryce fell into step beside her. That was fun, he murmured. She let out a short chuckle. For you, maybe. As they pushed through the heavy courtroom doors, the bright daylight hit Ava's face. She took a deep breath, not because she was relieved, but because she was ready. This wasn't just her win. It was a message to every cop who thought they could bend the truth, to every system that let it happen, to every person who never got their justice. The game had changed, and Ava Caldwell, she never lost. Some people get caught, some don't. But when the truth finally comes to light, it doesn't just take down one person, it shakes the whole system. Ava knew that. What happened in that courtroom wasn't just about her case. It was about all the others. The ones who didn't have surveillance footage. The ones who didn't have lawyers who believed in them. The ones who didn't have a voice loud enough to fight back. But that was changing, because when one lie gets exposed, it makes people start looking at the others. And Harper? He wasn't going to walk away from this unscathed. His name was already being whispered in the hallways. His past cases were about to be reviewed. It started with one case, one woman who wouldn't back down. But it wouldn't end here. If you take anything from this story, let it be this. The truth always finds its way out. It might take time, it might take effort, but when the truth finally hits, it hits hard. And the people who think they can get away with it, they never see it coming. If this story made you think, share it. If you believe in holding people accountable, talk about it. Because real change only happens when people refuse to stay silent. And maybe, just maybe, the next person trying to get away with something like this will think twice.